Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mindset Forge, a podcast where we discuss the best ideas of humanity, the most useful practices, and the most skillful means for developing a more well-adjusted and adaptive mindset. To do this, I will be discussing latest science, ancient philosophy that has stood the test of time, as well as the thoughts and actions of important historical paragons. The goal is to give you tools and practices and ideas for your self-improvement, with the goal of moving ahead the entire humanity. Our discussion will focus on the ideas and practices with the most cash value, so practices that are easy to take up but hold enormous potential. And since most of these practices have to do with changing your thinking and attitudes, they are completely free. Call me Laurent Lohel, I will be your host, and welcome aboard. Also, make sure to like Mindset Forge on Spotify and YouTube, as well as check out our Discord server, where you can find links to my book, which you can buy on Amazon to support my another side enterprise of being a fiction author. Without further ado, let's get to the episode. Mindset Forge, Episode 7. Mental Objects. Science to imagine yourself better. Imagination will often carry us to worlds that never were, but without it, we go nowhere. Carl Sagan. Another part identified as comprising ourself are mental objects, which mean everything in our minds, first and foremost thoughts and conceptions. In this episode, I will take this term to include the things we imagine, since they take place within our minds. And I have good news for all you daydreamers out there. Imagined things have been shown to have numerous different benefits for those in the know. We will also touch on the negative aspects of imagination, namely intrusive thoughts and rumination. Many consider using their imagination a waste of time or childish, but I hope after this episode they think otherwise. Imagination, memory, and actual sensation share a remarkable similarity in terms of the brain regions they involve, highlighting the close relationship between these cognitive processes. Research in neuroscience has revealed that many of the same brain regions are activated during imagination, memory retrieval, and actual sensory perception. For example, when we visualize something in our mind, the visual cortex, the region responsible for processing visual information, is activated. Similarly, when we imagine a sound, the auditory cortex becomes engaged. One study by Koslun, Ganis, and Thompson, titled Neural Foundations of Imagery, highlights the overlapping neural basis of mental imagery and actual perception. The researchers found that mental imagery could activate brain regions similar to those involved in actual sensory experiences. And this has led to many researchers going so far as to say that the brain dreams up our reality. The brain and the body, as in line with embodiment, also responds to imagined things in a similar way to real perceptions. For example, imagining a bright light makes the pupil constrict, and the brighter the imagined light, the more the pupil constricts, like when viewing a light source in the outside world. But that is not all. I will just quote from a study called Neural Foundations of Imagery, published in Nature Reviews in 2001. Quote, There is much evidence that imagery of emotional events activates the autonomic nervous system and, as is also evident in singular neuron recordings in humans, the amygdala. That is, visualizing an object has much the same effects on the body as actually seeing the object. For example, skin conductance increases, as do heart rate and breathing rate, when subjects view pictures of threatening objects. And the same result occurs when they merely visualize the objects. Indeed, mental images of aversive stimuli activate the anterior insula, the principal cortical side of feedback from autonomic nervous system. In addition, Kreyman, Koch, and Fried recorded from single cells in human brain, hippocampus, amygdala, entorhinal cortex, and parahippocampal gyrus, while subjects were shown pictures or formed mental images of those same pictures. Some of the cells that responded selectively when subjects viewed specific visual stimuli, for example faces, also responded selectively when those same stimuli were visualized. Of particular interest, this pattern was seen in the amygdala, which is known to have a key role in certain emotions, especially fear and anger. So, imagery can engage neural structures that are also engaged in perception, and those neural structures can, in turn, affect events in the body itself." End quote. So, it is high time to stop thinking about imagining things as something less important as things we see in the outside world. Both are, if you look closely enough at the mechanisms in our brain, imaginations. The numerous examples from previous episodes of the various ways our perceptions change should also make one think twice before trusting our senses. When you look at the processes behind our conscious perception, it is fair to say that we dream or imagine our reality. Let us then jump into how one can use their imagination for their own improvement and aid. Let us start with physical performance. A meta-analysis on mental practice called "Does Mental Practice Enhance Performance?" found that mental practice enhanced performance in both cognitive and physical tasks, and the more the task required cognitive elements, the greater the impact. Physical tasks included things related to strength, endurance, and coordination, with strength benefiting least from mental rehearsal, but there was an effect on strength as well. It has also been shown that mental rehearsal can help in learning new movements. In one study, the subjects were tasked with learning to abduct, meaning to move to the side instead of the center of the body, their big toes. At the start, there were people who could not do this at all, and people who could do it a little. The group who could not perform this movement, so moving their big toes towards the side or away from the middle of their body, did not benefit from mental rehearsal without physical training. But the group who could perform this movement but had room for improvement really became better at this movement with mental rehearsal alone. Another study showed that imagining a movement faster improved the speed when actually performing the movement, while decreasing the imagined speed and did the same to the actual execution of the movement. The researchers point out that this is why it is important to imagine the movement at the same speed as the actual performance. The effect of mental imagery training on muscular strength performance has been extensively studied, and the beneficial connection is well established. One explanation on why imagining using one's muscles leads to increased strength performance is that repeated mental attempts at maximal muscle activation lead to stronger cortical signals to muscles and adaptation of motor cortex neurons. Mental imagery of muscle activation also leads to EMG activity in those muscles, and it has even been shown that imagining lifting heavy objects leads to greater EMG activity than the imagined lifting of light objects. In a review article on the subject, it was shown that the effect of mental imagery on strength performance range from the slight 2.6% to staggering 136%, which was achieved in the strength of plantar flexors, meaning the muscles that allow you to stand on your toes, with 7 weeks training. Just to mention some other strength benefits, mental imagery improved 1 repetition maximum bench press by 13.1% and 1 repetition maximum HAL squat by 16.9% in a study population of 45 healthy males in the age range of roughly 20 to 26 years old. If you go to the gym, you know how impressive an increase 13% of 1 rep max is. It is also well established that the more mental effort you use on the imaginations, the more effective they will be. Internal imagery, meaning you imagine the movement like you experience it in your own body, imagining your muscles contracting and all the accompanying sensations, is more effective than external imagery, where you imagine the movement taking place outside the body in only the mind. So, to improve your strength without actually lifting more weights than usual, imagine yourself lifting a heavy object with as much detail as you can, imagining the movement at a realistic speed. But remember that the studies show that you need to have at least a little experience of the movement, and the most benefit will be gained by also doing physical exercise. If you are learning of this effect of your mind on your muscles for the first time, it may sound unbelievable, but your body believes it. The body's responses to imagined training are similar to actual training, although not as strong. For example, imagining running on a treadmill at a pace of 8 kilometers an hour increased heart rate by 13.2%, while actually running on a treadmill at 8 kilometers an hour increased heart rate by 70.7%. Of course, if you already do physical training, replacing it with just mental training will definitely lead to losses of performance. But if you are looking for a way to improve your performance, get through a plateau at the gym or something similar, research has shown that adding mental imagery training on top of physical training is more efficient than, or at least comparable to, just physical training. Mental practice is also beneficial for reducing strength losses during injury, while one cannot do physical training. Moving on from strength, mental preparation has also been shown to improve sprinting results up to 2 minutes after the imagery, but not 3 to 5 minutes after, which suggests that the priming effect of imagery on performance, at least when sprinting, does not last long, and it is best to do this kind of psyching up just before the actual performance. Mental imagery training has also been shown to be beneficial for endurance-type running. A study by researchers Limani and Cheor investigated the effects of physical training, mental imagery, and positive self-talk on physical performance as well as psychological skills. They found that mental imagery combined with physical training was more effective than physical training alone, and adding positive self-talk to the mix was even more potent. Positive self-talk consisted of phrases such as "I can lift more weight" and "I can jump high." They repeated this either alone to themselves or in just their minds. These mental interventions were found to have a positive effect on not only strength and power, but motivation and self-efficacy as well. With all the benefits, it is no wonder that mental imagery training is one of the most common sports psychology interventions used by professional athletes. For example, they use mental imagery practices just before performance to boost their output, and when they have a rest day from their physical training, they might continue training mentally to improve their results. And now you can benefit from this lesser-known mental practice as well. Now that you have imagined yourself stronger, faster and more skillful, what's next? I was thinking mood. What does science say about the effect of mental imagery on mood in general, not limited to just sports? A great deal, and it is all very interesting and promising. If you think being mindful of your mental images to benefit your mood is not worth the trouble, think again. Research has shown that imagery has a particularly powerful effect on emotion, stronger than verbal processing of same material, and the effect is causal. The possible negative effect of uncontrolled mental imagery is also considerable. I quote from a review discussing mental imagery in clinical depression from the year 2014. Quote, negative mental images may be an important factor in the onset of mental disorders, contribute to their maintenance, lead to an exacerbation of existing symptoms, or be a core symptom in themselves. End quote. This same review discusses how generating positive mental images can be used to sort of overwrite the negative images, which has led, in extreme cases, people being cured from severe depression in just 9 sessions. And that is astonishing change, since in my work I often see patients who are on depression medication for years on end. To take another example, a 2017 study conducted on adolescents from 11 to 17 years of age found that positive mental imagery benefited mood in a variety of measurable ways. In this study, one group of subjects generated positive mental images while another generated both positive and negative mental images. They accomplished this by showing the subjects the image and a text prompt, for example, an image of a cell phone and the text prompt funny message for a positive image and the text prompt of ignoring me for a negative image. The group imagining solely positive things reported better mood afterwards, and since the situations the researchers used were familiar from everyday life, a mindful person can use this knowledge in their daily life and generate positive mental images from their actual experience. It does not have to be anything fancy. There were other tasks as well. The subjects were asked to evaluate the pleasantness of pictures and unscramble sentences that had been put together so one could generate either a positive or a negative message. And the positive imagery group enjoyed the pictures more as long as they had imagined in first person, and generated less negative sentences from the word salad. Another study corroborated a similar finding, with positive imagery improving mood, and they also tested a behavioral tasks where the subjects were asked to try their hand at a fishing magnetic fish game. The group with positive imagery caught more fish than the control group. Also, after 24 hours, the positive imagery group perceived less negative words in another word test than a negative imagery group, so the effect of the practice lasts for some time. Another study also found that positive mental imagery protected against the induction of negative mood, later being more effective than verbal conditioning, essentially functioning as a cognitive vaccine against depressed mood. The effect of imagery has also been studied in older adults and found to decrease negative mood and anxiety and improve the vividness of positive imagery of future. This is important since less clear and vivid imaginations of the future are linked with depression. I think we have established the amazing power of mental imagery for cultivating positive mood. In most of these studies, this effect was accomplished with image-word pairs and asking the subjects to generate imagery, but I'm sure these practices can be adapted to everyday life. For example, generating positive images about the various thoughts and expectations that enter your mind, and when you, thanks to mindfulness, notice a negative mental image, that should serve as a signal for you to replace it with a positive one. Furthermore, it has been shown that imagining future events can change subjective perception of the likelihood of those events as well as future behavior. In other words, if you imagine something happening to yourself or others, you start to perceive that outcome as more likely to happen. This might become a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts. For example, in a study where people imagined themselves subscribing to a cable TV service, it was found that this imagination of the future led them to being significantly more likely to actually subscribe to a cable TV service in the future. An obvious way to leverage this would be to stay mindful of your future expectations and imagine positive ones, such as success, while letting go of negative ones, such as imaginations of failure. But can anyone use mental imagery to their benefit? The studies generally show that image vividness is related to the potency of the effect, and it is well established that there is great individual variance in this regard, ranging from hyperphantasia, where mental images are as vivid as perceptions generated by the retinas, to aphantasia, where there are no mental images at all. I think I am closer in the spectrum towards the aphantasia group, since I rarely see actual images when I imagine things, with the exception being when I am between sleep and wakefulness. Instead, my experience of imagining things is that I feel like I see something, but I do not actually see it. I don't know any other way to describe it. Despite this lack of actual visual images, I have still found great personal benefit on many occasions in the practice of visual imagery. Remember that studies always have their populations, and some things work for others and not for others, and you simply have to try it out for yourself. Other things shown to have influenced the vividness of mental images include the female sex hormones, where females in mid-luteal phase have been increased vividness, and progesterone concentration was related to vividness as well. Cortical excitability also controls the strength of mental imagery. The more excited the cortex is, the weaker are the images generated. I looked for studies discussing whether one can improve their visualization skills, meaning get more vivid and strong imagery, and found just one which answered in the negative. And they did not find improvement in visualization vividness in the course of 5 days training. And that seems like a short time, and the authors speculate that the effects might be hard to document, but as of now I could find no evidence that skills of visualization can be improved, at least scientific evidence. This episode is drawing to a close, but I did tease magic, so here goes. In some more esoteric practices, like certain branches of Tibetan Buddhism, the practitioners imagine deities, magical creatures, and even demons, visualizing them as strongly as they can. They do not necessarily believe in the existence of these creatures. What is important is that they believe in the effect the imagination can have, and strong intention and devotion to their visualization. This way they can get many kinds of benefits, from advancing in the spiritual path towards higher, subtle states of consciousness and understanding, to lucid dreams and so on. This way they use something that is imagined and fictional, like a mythological entity, to have a real-world effect on themselves, and that can be thought of as a type of magic. Sorry if you were expecting fireballs, but this is yet another practice that you might keep in mind. Even if you don't take it up right away, it is good to know what kinds of options and practices exist for one determined to seek higher states of consciousness. I won't go into more detail since I imagine it would be going too far for the most of you, but you are free to ask questions in the comment section. Also, in the Tibetan Buddhist text I have read on dream yoga specifically, the author describes different stages of visualization. At the start, visualization is very difficult and taxing, and then it becomes easier and finally effortless, like letting sun shine on your skin. This implies that some progress can be made in visualization skills, even if researchers could not find it in the short time frame. So don't lose hope. This marks the first of Mindset Forge's more rationally partitioned episodes. Instead of trying to fit everything on the subject of mental objects into one episode, this subject, too, will be turned into multiple episodes. This way I can actually spend more time on specific issues, so in this case less is truly more. Also, I can address any of your questions on the subject in later parts. I hope the grand plan of Mindset Forge is beginning to become clear, but let me just go over it again. The idea is to give you a toolset to control and improve your various aspects. Take mood, for example. With the information provided in the episode thus far, you already have many ways to improve and manage your mood. With mindfulness, you become aware of your subpar mood and can then ease it with mindfulness meditation, which has been shown to be very effective. You can use embodied approaches with postures and expressions. You can use mental visualization. You can recognize that the mood is affecting your perception of things and that they are not really as glum as they seem, and so on. You will have a toolset that you can take anywhere, that is completely free, and where every tool synergizes with other tools. If you keep at these practices consistently, you are in effect rebuilding yourself piece by piece into a stronger, happier, and better adapted version of yourself. And once you get started, it is amazing how far you can go and what kinds of changes can be achieved with more advanced practices of various kinds. So, to summarize, we discussed how mental imagery can be used to improve physical performance and mood, as well as pointed out the neuroscientific similarities between imagining, remembering, and perceiving. Magic was mentioned. We left a lot for further episodes as well. That's all for now. Be sure to tune in to the next episode. And thank you for listening to this episode of the Mindset Forge. I hope you found it informative and the lessons and practices spoken in it relevant to your situation. I also hope you found it as entertaining to listen as I found making it to be. If you found it beneficial, be sure to follow Mindset Forge on Spotify as well as on YouTube, where you can also give us a thumbs up. Also, make sure to check out our Discord server for further discussion, where you can contact me directly. Links in description and channel information. There you can also find the link to my book, which I have self-published on Amazon, called Death Drive. If speculative dystopian near future sci-fi sounds like a cup of tea, getting the book is a great way to support my work as an author. So have a nice day, and memento cerebrum formare.